has Arne Slot been forced into using Alexander Isak quicker than he wanted to?
Yeah, I think so. I don't really see the alternative. He's obviously fighting to keep Alexander Isak out of the starting 11 in the Premier League, and what he's done here is offered him a route in. Brainless. Madness.
And I do actually understand why Ekitike did that, Scott, because he's sort of saying, by the way, I'm here, I cost a lot of money, and I'm delivering right from the very off. And I totally get that. There's a bit of a rivalry going on between him and Isak that's starting to develop. We quite like that as a little storyline.
As critical as he was in a public way, he's trying to send a message there to Ekitike that it's not about you, it is about the team. The only talking he needs to do is stick the ball in the back of the net and play well, and then shut up.
I think that's the reason why Arne Slot was so frustrated, because obviously having skipped the whole of pre-season, Isak is not quite up to full speed yet. Having said that, a British record player is not the worst option.
It's Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface, talkSPORT's chief football correspondent Alex Crook, and $1 Million Minto, Scotty baby. Listen, I want people to understand just how close the three of us are, okay? And I'll let you into a little secret as a result of that. Just in case you're worried that sometimes things get fractious on the pod. This is how close we are. Scott was the last person I spoke to last night before my head hit the pillow. It's true. Last thing I did was phone Scott just to see how his night went, and he did the same to me. But I have a confession to make. I feel guilty about that. I feel guilty. And do you know why I feel guilty, Scott?
Why do you feel guilty, Sam?
Because I had a missed call when I came off of the phone from you at 11:30 last night.
From you jilted me.
The Crookmeister. From the Crookmeister. I felt bad about it. And I tried desperately to ring you back at midnight last night once I'd finished talking to Scotty baby. Because I can't ignore you. But I couldn't get through. But I did also go through my call log yesterday, Crookmeister, and realised that was call number 7 of the day between the two of us. So I think we had enough contact. Ange Postecoglou still waiting his first Nottingham Forest win, but you two were commentating on that game for talkSPORT. Real Betis against Forest in midweek. What was your overall verdict, Scott?
I was really, really, really impressed. The first half from Forest, I thought they were superb. I wouldn't say quieting the crowd, because the crowd the Betis crowd can't be quietened. But I thought it was the perfect European away performance of a seasoned team that had been playing year in, year out in Europe, not the team that's been doing it for the first time in 30 seasons. I thought, obviously, Igor Jesus gets in terms of the scoreline, gets the plaudits, but Elliot Anderson, mate, honestly, he was absolutely sensational in that first half. And then the second half was completely different. Yeah, you could argue they perhaps didn't add enough going forward, but I thought defensively, structurally, and how well organised they were, and words you don't normally put towards an Ange Postecoglou team, I think despite them conceding a late equaliser, I feel very, very positive for Forest fans going forward.
Just how positive are you about Elliot Anderson? Because you did start wandering down a comparison route, which we were all on tenterhooks to find out exactly the name that was about to come off your tongue. Do you want to talk about it? You were about to compare him at one stage last night to...
Well, producer Jeremy's bang out of order, because obviously he's just got off the call as we're just about to record, and I've seen that he sneakily put it in there in the running order. And the reason why, and Crookie even said to me, "Go on, you got to tell us now." I went, "No, I can't, because you can't be comparing Elliot Anderson, with the greatest of respect to this particular world superstar." But my point is, before I say the name, is that when top players, and he's become a top player, or certainly becoming in the Premier League, when they look like they're playing in slow motion, everyone's running around them like that sort of proverbial swan beneath the water, and yet they still can't get anywhere near him. So the name was Zinedine Zidane. It's the reason why I didn't want to compare and put those two in the same sentence, but I was just so impressed with him in the first half, and so much so that if he carries on playing like that for club, for country, he's almost becoming a starter.
It's high praise, but you weren't the only one to praise him so highly last night, actually, because I think the boys on TV, Joe Cole, suggested that he would not only start in the World Cup, but he would also get himself an incredibly big move off the back of it. So you weren't the only one to wax
Okay,
lyrical
that's
about
good.
him. You are the only one to compare him to Zinedine Zidane, but it's good to be out on your own and make a name for yourself. Um, there were no real major shocks in the Carabao Cup. All the big boys were through. There was a shock in the Liverpool-Southampton game, though. The error from Ugo Ekitike, and Arne Slot wasn't happy about it. He's going to miss the weekend's game as a result, Crookmeister.
Well, it's brainless, isn't it? And I think you could see by the reaction of Jeremy Frimpong that Liverpool teammates felt the same way. It was funny, actually, the moment of realisation from Arne Slot when the whole of Anfield stopped celebrating the goal because they realised that Ugo Ekitike was about to be sent off. He was quite straight talking afterwards, described it as a stupid mistake. And it's costly as far as Ekitike is concerned, because I know you've been a big fan of the way that he started this season. He's obviously fighting to keep Alexander Isak out of the starting 11 in the Premier League. And what he's done here is offered him a route in. Brainless, madness.
It certainly has done that. Ryder Cup weekend as well, but we're going to tee off with the first game at the G-Tech for Bryan Mbeumo as he goes back from whence he came. Brentford against Manchester United is live on talkSPORT, 12:30 lunchtime Saturday. Bryan Mbeumo returning to the G-Tech. Manchester United looking to string together back-to-back victories after their win over Chelsea, but they haven't won in 7 away Premier League trips. Scott, how do they do this?
Well, I think they've got to carry on with the sort of same mentality that they had at Old Trafford. You know, you and I were at the game, and I just thought they played to the conditions, but they actually played on the front foot from the start. I mean, we've been saying a lot of people have criticised Ruben Amorim, and we've criticised him for sure. But if you look at each particular game, and the stats actually suggest that in terms of getting towards the box and getting shots, not necessarily on target, that they're right up there, if not number one, Manchester United. So I just think there's been periods of times in games where 30 minutes here, 45 minutes there. I thought they were very good and deserved to win, certainly after the first half performance against Chelsea. They just need to do that on a more regular basis. And Bruno Fernandes, you know, whatever we say about him, he's not a 6, and he's really not. My goodness me, they need him in that side. He's just an absolutely superb player. And look, this is a great opportunity against a side that I still feel, if Keith gets them above the relegation zone, no matter how many places, he's done a great job. It's a great opportunity for United as well to get back-to-back victories.
Certainly is, and we talked about this quite a lot. And the Bruno Fernandes thing is really interesting because I maintain that if you play the system correctly and you have a player from that back three that wanders into midfield and pushes everybody up, then he moves into a more of an 8/10 position where he can influence the player, and he's much more useful for Manchester United. But the shot data and the XG created, for which they are number one in the Premier League, by the way, Manchester United, gives me confidence with them that they will have a better season than last year. Now, you might say that's not that difficult, but I think they'll finish top 10, top 8 because of the fact that the shot data will turn around eventually. You know, I know they haven't scored that many goals this season so far, but if you keep having those shots, you keep creating those chances, once Šeško is up to speed, surely it has to turn. Crook, are you still anticipating a top 5 finish?
Listen, let's not get carried away after one victory, because there have been so many false dawns for Manchester United. Over
I was being facetious, to be fair.
But it's an opportunity to put together a run of wins. Brentford away, followed by Sunderland at home before the international break. If they could win those two, and it's a big if because they don't tend to win back-to-back games these days, then I think the start to the campaign will take on a different complexion. Actually, the other stat that I found interesting is the fact that Opta say Manchester United have officially had the most difficult start to the season of any team in the Premier League. So because of that victory over Chelsea, all of a sudden it doesn't look too bad. Obviously, the Grimsby debacle in the Cup is still the anomaly, still the low ebb, but there are reasons to be positive. And as Scott has said, I think this is a real opportunity for United to put back-to-back wins on the board, and the feeling around Old Trafford will be a lot different then. The caveat is they've had issues at Brentford in the past. We remember that terrible day under Erik ten Hag. What, his second game in charge when they got absolutely battered. I remember, was it last season, Mason Mount scored late in the game. You thought he'd won it, and Brentford went straight up the other end and equalised. So it's not been a happy hunting ground in recent seasons.
It's going to be a bit of an old school game. United the most accurate with long balls forward, and they will look to try and bypass any Brentford press. Brentford look to be a little bit more sort of aggressive in the middle, might go after the soft centre of Manchester United. It'd be interesting to see who comes into that midfield. They'll also chuck long throws in, long balls in. We've seen them do that already this season. They've got a good point at home against Chelsea. Who plays in that midfield? Because no Casemiro this weekend. Mainu be a candidate. Mount might be a candidate, but my favourite is Ugarte. Is that just not the most sensible replacement?
Depends who you talk to. I mean, I think it's been Amorim's go-to.
Well, I'm talking to you.
Well, I'd love to see Cobby get his opportunity, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think it will probably be Ugarte, who for me is less dynamic. Mason Mount, I guess, would be an option. Is he going to be fit? I mean, he's never really fit, is he? So, yeah, I think it will probably be Ugarte in alongside Bruno Fernandes.
We're still yet to see Senna Lomans. Has Altay nailed down the number one spot for the season now, do you think, Scott? Why are you laughing?
Go on, Crookie.
Because he's rubbish. That's why. Oh, dear,
but he's been picked every single week. So, is he the number one goalkeeper?
Look, it's a fair question, but I mean, I it doesn't matter now. You can't turn back time, but how they didn't get or why they didn't get Donnarumma or Martinez, just that experienced position. You know, we talked about how you win games in both boxes. Well, you know, that's by having a great goalkeeper as well as having a very good goal scorer, and you need someone with experience. But they've gone down that route. What's the point of bringing in someone when Altay has been making all the mistakes he's been making, and yet you still keep him as the number one? You look like a bit of a laughing stock. But the thing is, then you're hoping that this youngster, clearly with a lot of talent, is able to handle something, you know, wearing the Manchester United shirt that a lot of not just goalkeepers, but outfield players haven't been able to do for the last decade. But what's the point of bringing him in if you don't use him? Because Altay, I agree with Crookie, he's not good enough.
Yeah, handling very important, especially in his position. Crookmeister, Mike Maignan has been linked with a move to Manchester United in January. Is that something that you can update us on?
Yeah, I think he's one that United are keeping an eye on, along with Chelsea, despite both clubs telling us at the start of the season that the goalkeeping department wasn't a major issue. Obviously, Chelsea tried to sign him before the Club World Cup, had a £25 million bid, rejected. His contract is up at the end of the season, so to get someone of his experience, full French international, 30 years of age, on a free transfer potentially, I think makes a lot of sense for both United and Chelsea. I think he would improve both their goalkeeping departments.
Crook, you also spoke to the United fan this week on Inside Devils who isn't cutting his hair until Manchester United win 5 games in a row. Whatever happens, you cannot join in on this challenge, okay? Because your hair grows very quickly. Now, his is bushy, but if you don't cut your hair until they win 5 in a row, I mean, I'm not necessarily sure we'll fit you in the camera frame.
That's a fair point, and actually, an appointment at the barbers is overdue for me. He could have done 2 games in a row and still be in the same situation. So 5 is ambitious. And actually, if you look at the games, I've mentioned the matches coming up before the international break. The first one back in October is Liverpool away, and then Brighton at home. So I'm not sure he's going to get to 5. To be honest, I think this is going to carry on.
I mean, there's only Liverpool a Liverpool fan that could say something like that. Anybody else, even Man City and Arsenal, you don't say that. Well, let's have a look in a couple of months.
Let's talk Brentford with Scott Minto. He is Keith Andrews' best pal. So many people have written Keith off, including Crookie, who then decided not to write him off, but now he's going to go back and write him off again. 4 points from 5 games. It's their worst start to a season in 5 campaigns. How concerned are you about them? Because the defensive frailties worry me.
Yeah, and I sort of thought I was, you know, the defensive side would be the better side. It would be more the goals, obviously, with Mbeumo and Vissa going. But they do seem to be conceding poor goals. It'd be interesting to see whether he goes 5 at the back or whether he goes with a 4. Listen, I think he's been very impressive so far, and even to turn around Crookie. I know he's willing to go again, but we know he flip-flops at any given time. But he's seen enough, and he said, I've heard him say that he's been impressed by Keith so far. And there is only so much a manager can do. And I said, just forget the fact of the players that have gone. Anyone following Thomas Frank would struggle. And I say 17th would be a very good position to finish. But to lose who they've lost, plus your captain, your leader, those two front players as well, it was always going to be difficult. But this is the time now. This is where the Sunderland defeat and the Fulham defeat were very difficult, because they've got obviously United and City, and then you've got a 2-week stew over. And if he doesn't pick up any points out of those games, then, obviously people will be sharpening their knives. But the season's a long one. Brentford know what they're doing. More importantly, he knows what he's doing. And the Brentford fans just need to be patient.
They certainly do. Crystal Palace against Liverpool this weekend. Has Arne Slot been forced into using Alexander Isak quicker than he wanted to? Because the last time I saw him, he was running across the pitch during half-time, doing some fitness work, having warmed up in the first 45 minutes against Southampton. Crook.
Yeah, I think so. I don't really see the alternatives. I'll tell you who surprised me, actually. I'm not saying he's going to start, but he's making more of an impact than I thought he would, is Chiesa. I think he looks really sharp whenever he's played. And at the moment, Isak doesn't, so maybe that is one possibility. But I think that's the reason why Arne Slot was so frustrated, because obviously having skipped the whole of pre-season, Isak is not quite up to full speed yet. And you can't carry any passengers away from home at Selhurst Park. Arne Slot will be aware of that. This is a match between the two unbeaten teams in the Premier League. Is it 16, 17 games without defeat for Palace? I think ideally Ekitike would have started, and that moment of madness has cost Liverpool dearly. Having said that, a British record player, it's not the worst option to throw in, is he?
No, something has got to give here. 17 games unbeaten for Crystal Palace, Liverpool with the 100% record so far. I think you're absolutely right to mention Federico Chiesa. He's been quietly brilliant for Liverpool whenever he's featured this season. I can't believe he's not in the Champions League squad. I think that's why he was so determined to make an impact whenever he's come onto the pitch. And actually, in the aftermath of all of the discussions about taking his shirt off and getting sent off, it was Federico Chiesa that came in for the most praise from Arne Slot during those discussions, because he was like, hold on a second, it's all right taking your shirt off and pointing to me. And I do actually understand why Ekitike did that, Scott, because he's sort of saying, by the way, I'm here, I cost a lot of money, and I'm delivering right from the very off. And I totally get that. There's a bit of a rivalry going on between him and Isak that's starting to develop. We quite like that as a little storyline. But Chiesa provided this brilliant assist, unselfish assist, when he could have shot himself. And the ball over the top wasn't bad either. It was very much a team goal, not necessarily an Ekitike goal. He just provided the finishing touch. But he has been terrific, hasn't he? And a couple of years ago, he was a fantastic player. The injuries just took their toll.
Yeah, that's been the major problem. And people, when they say last season they didn't bring anyone in, well, he was the one. And he's sort of, almost undercover, really, and he didn't play too much. The fact that I think Arne Slot didn't get rid of him over the summer, and they clearly could have done, I think tells me that he sees him as a really good lad, first and foremost, really good person to be in the dressing room. They're the type of characters that you need if you are to win a Premier League. And although he didn't play many minutes on the pitch, clearly he must be a good guy, because do you know what? I know what you're saying about the sort of the rivalry between Ekitike and Isak, but they've got to be careful there. And Arne Slot, for him to be as critical as he was in a public way, he's trying to send a message there to Ekitike that it's not about you, it is about the team. So he needs to be very, very careful. And he didn't need to do that at all. The only talking he needs to do is stick the ball in the back of the net and play well, and then shut up. He doesn't need to do anything else at all, because Isak is not fit, and this was a great opportunity for him to really show, where he has hit the ground running, that he should be the main man, despite the money being spent on Isak. So for him to do that now not only gives Isak a chance to obviously start, but also, in the manager's eyes, that's a bit of a negative thing, which you've already seen him come out and be critical of that. And you don't want to do that with your manager.
Florian Wirtz has been benched for the last 2 games. Does he come back into the team here? I mean, Scott, what have you made of him so far? Because there was a staunch defence of him by Kevin Hatchard on Monday's pod. You won't be too surprised about that because dear Kevin Herr Hatchard is very much a Germophile. And I suppose they don't get much wrong. I mean, Michael Edwards and Richard Hughes don't get much wrong in recruitment. I think he'll be fine. I just do think that it's going to take time for him to get up to the physicality of the Premier League. Would you concur with that? Have you seen that from him so far?
Yeah, and when I saw the running order come in last night, I thought, oh, I'm going to have a listen to what Kev said. And to be honest with you, it was short. And I'm glad that, what have we settled on now? Germophile, is that the word?
No, is it? He said Deutsche-Phile, actually,
okay,
didn't he?
Deutsche-Phile. Okay,
but Germophile sounds a little bit better.
It's nichts spreche Deutsch. So look, yeah, it's going to take time. If we all thought that everyone who was signed is going to hit the ground running, then I think we're being a little bit naive. Now, from a personal point of view, Florian Wirtz will be thinking, well, I didn't want it to be me. I want it to be someone else. But as much as we say that Liverpool on paper have improved, and they really have, the fact that they have that consistency still from last season, the fact that they didn't really make that signings, only Chiesa was the only one, and they have that, as I say, I use the word consistency of the players, that even if the new ones come in and don't do too well, you've still got players that have already been there for a couple of years that can stand up and score. And that's exactly what's happened. Liverpool haven't played well. Wirtz hasn't played particularly well. But you can see he's a player. You can see why so much money has been spent, albeit I think it's probably a bit too much. But you do what you do to get him. He's a great talent. He's taken his time to get used to, maybe off the pitch as well as on the pitch. But I have no doubt he'll be a very, very, very good Liverpool player. Just I don't know when he's going to start being that very good Liverpool player. He wants it to be right now, and he'll have to show it in training that things haven't started too well for him on a personal level. But actually, it's a great team to come into because they're winning.
Palace themselves haven't improved personnel. They've probably gone backwards in terms of the playing squad, but they're still performing at a high level. 17 games, as we mentioned, unbeaten. Biggest test of the season so far, Crookmeister. But they are live contenders here, aren't they? I mean, they've got a good team that can cause people problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And Liverpool have had some difficulty at Selhurst Park in the past when title challenges have faltered. So Arne Slot is going to know his team are in a game here. I just wonder physically if this might be a bridge too far for Palace, because they've been reliant really on the same hardcore players, the same 11 virtually week in, week out. There was a suggestion before the West Ham game that Jean-Philippe Mateta was looking just a little bit fatigued and maybe taken out of the team. He scored, so obviously that wasn't a huge issue. But I think Liverpool's energy levels could be a problem for Palace and for Oliver Glasner. And as you say, this is their biggest test of the season. Just on Wirtz, when you look at the Palace midfield, which is so key to their success, I don't think he will play this weekend. I think Arne Slot will go for the more tried and trusted, that Gravenberch, McAllister, Szoboszlai triple header that served them so well last season. I'm not sure this is the game for Florian Wirtz because he's going to be up against the likes of Will Hughes and Adam Wharton in that midfield area.
Wonder if he might come off the flank and Gakpo might go down the middle as a central striker.
Yeah,
which would mitigate the fact that they don't want to play Isak from the start as well. You mentioned Mateta there. Last time out against West Ham, got his 50th goal for Crystal Palace. He had some speculation this summer, but wasn't necessarily the subject of heavy interest. Is he going to be the next piece of the crown jewels that are up for auction from the Palace, Crook?
Well, I was surprised there wasn't more interest in him in the summer. He was regularly linked with Manchester United, but I'm not sure that was anything more than speculation. When you look at the dearth of number nines, particularly those proven in the Premier League, I'd have thought the clubs would have been queuing up for him. I might have taken him to Newcastle ahead of Johan Wissa, to be brutally honest with you, but obviously that didn't happen. In terms of next cab off the rank, Mark Gay's going to leave at the end of the season. We all know that. Adam Wharton, I think if he can stay fit, and that's a big if because he's picked up a lot of injuries along the way, he's got a lot of suitors as well. So it's a challenge. And actually, I was told a few weeks ago that the Crystal Palace were actively preparing for the departure of Oliver Glasner at the end of the season. So I think that could be their biggest headache.
Wow, that's a big summer then coming for Crystal Palace if that is to be the case. First of all, then they need to negotiate a home game against Liverpool. Tottenham against Wolverhampton Wanderers. 8 o'clock bonus fixture, talkSPORT. Looking forward to this one. Wolves started the season with 5 defeats from 5. Already puts them amongst the worst in Premier League history, as 6 is putting them in rarefied air. And Scott, Spurs can pile on the pressure for Pereira here, can't they? Because they've been robust and effective so far under Thomas Frank.
Yeah, I mean, I said when he first went in, I mean, Glasner would have been my number one choice, but I really like Thomas Frank and how adaptable he is. And I think he's shown that already, and if anything, I mean, look, I think it just goes to show how good Bournemouth are. And they went to Tottenham and got a very good win. But apart from that, I think Frank has been superb. He's having to deal with the Champions League and Premier League now, and that I think a little bit later on will take its toll a bit. But at this moment in time, they've been absolutely superb. They really have, and they're up against the Wolves side, where I know producer Jeremy was absolutely delighted with the result last week, but that was a big loss. That was a big loss, especially to go 1-0 up and then to lose.
Did you see the XG in that game against Leeds?
No, go on.
They bossed it. They absolutely bossed it, despite the fact that they conceded 3 goals in the match. And it was against the statistics. And I think that's the problem for Wolverhampton Wanderers, because I've seen them a couple of times now, and they do create chances. They just don't score enough of them, and they concede way too many. They conceded 12 already. And that is a major issue.
Yeah, and I said before, remember this time last week, and we talked about it, and I said, look, I've seen enough of Wolves to say that they can hurt teams, and I don't believe that they should be bottom of the table. It's all very well having the XG, and I suppose in a way that Vitor Pereira will just be saying, well, there's nothing I can do. I'm creating situations where we should be going on and scoring goals and winning games. But if you are conceding in the way that you are, if you are going 1-0 up and you still find a way to lose to a team that, with the greatest respect, is a massive club, but would be happy being 17th come the end of the season, then it doesn't bode well. And I can't see them getting anything here either. I really can't.
I just wonder how many of those reserves who played in midweek and beat Everton will be pushing for selection, and whether or not that win will galvanise them into something a little bit more. The new deal for Pereira looks a little bit of a head scratch, though, doesn't it, Crook?
Yeah, because it's very unusual that a manager who's made such a poor start to the season would be rewarded with a long-term contract. I was told, actually, that maybe it was because West Ham were sniffing around. Obviously, we know that Graham Potter is likely to be replaced at some point in the near future, so maybe Pereira has used that to his advantage. But I think this was the Wolves hierarchy wanting to be seen to coming out and backing their manager. Maybe they've not learned from past mistakes, because they did the same thing with Gary O'Neill and obviously ended up having to sack him. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Vitor Pereira, but it does feel a little bit like history repeating here, where a manager goes into Wolves, gets a good tune out the players for 6 or 7 months, and then it very quickly evaporates. What I think Pereira has managed to do is clear a lot of the bad eggs out of the dressing room to try and guard against that. And I agree with Scott. I think they're a better team than the points tally suggests, but that was a terrible result at home to Leeds, especially having taken the lead.
You're completely right about history repeating itself, but that's more on the owners, isn't it, than it is on the managers. I just get the feeling that the managers are hamstrung in that place.
Do you know what? They've got Domenico Tete, who came in as director of football, who was, he's kind of with Vitor Pereira. So I think he sees what goes on behind the scenes. I think he sees a manager that actually has been dealt a really, don't want to be disrespectful and say a bad set of cards, but your best players have gone. Talented players have come in, but they're not ready yet. They're not ready to grind out the Premier League and get used to it. So, Vitor
You're not
Pereira,
recruiting from the top shelf, are you?
No, exactly. And I just hope, the fans don't turn and therefore Vitor Pereira, suddenly he's under pressure all the time. But, when you've got someone in director of football who's in your camp, I think that helps a lot if you're a manager.
Absolutely. Spurs will be popular on the coupons this week. I know you lot are all thinking about putting them in for last man standing. Recalling Richarlison last week has really worked for Thomas Frank. Is he the Spurs number 9? And what does it say about the future of Dominic Solanke, Crook?
I think the number 9 is a problem for Spurs. Obviously, with Dom's fitness problems, didn't score a lot of goals last season anyway. Richarlison is either brilliant or useless. And it depends how the game starts, because he has a tendency, if things don't go his way early on, that he goes hiding, he can sulk a little bit. So I think it's an area that long term Spurs are going to have to address. And Adrian Durham raised the point on Game Day Live on Saturday that maybe Thomas Frank might come calling for Ivan Toney to get him back from Saudi Arabia. I think that would be difficult because he's earning so much money in the Saudi Pro League. But that, for me, would be a game changer and would turn Tottenham from a team who I don't think are top four contenders at this moment in time to a team that could well challenge for the Champions League.
Slight irony there, isn't there, that Ivan Toney could go from earning bazillions a week in Saudi to Spurs. It's a joke. I don't mean it. I'm sure they pay very, very well. Don't at me. Kudus has got 3 assists already. Richarlison has got a couple of goals, and they are winning games. So it's been a positive start, I think, for Thomas Frank. But they had positive starts under Ange Postecoglou. They had positive start under Nuno Espirito Santo. They had a positive start under Jose Mourinho. They had a positive start under Antonio Conte. What makes this different, Scott?
It does feel a bit different. I mean, the interesting thing is, and you talk about, joking with the wages, Daniel Levy's not around anymore. So, the owners don't have that layer of protection. So if they do want to get an Ivan Toney, I think that's probably a poor example because he is on so much money. There is no excuse now, but I just think they've got a manager.
But once he's had that money in his back pocket, Scott, I mean, he has been there for nearly 2 years. He's probably made enough to set him up for life. So he won't mind coming back and only getting 100 grand a week.
Yeah, no, he'll get more. I mean, that's my point. He probably will get more because Levy's not around anymore. But blimey, that's time has flown by if they're 2 years and nearly up. But he's got to be 2 years, isn't he, to take all that money tax free. So maybe once the 2 years are up, I think that'd be a great signing. And he'll have to be realistic in terms of who he's got. He's got the money in his back pocket. He's not going to get a top team sort of fighting for the Premier League title. Be a great signing for Spurs. But I think between Richarlison, Dom Solanke and him as well, I think with the squad that they've got, as I say, and the adaptability of a manager who actually can manage up as well as down. Let's be honest with you. There's a lot of managers that have not been able to manage up. I think there's a really promising time here for Spurs. I don't think they're going to be finishing top 4 though, because I think they'll struggle to combine Premier League and Champions League. But I definitely think they can finish in a European place and go to the knockout stages of the Champions League.
I'm going to Norway with Tottenham Hotspur on Monday to Bodo Glimt for their second game in the Champions League. They got off to a positive start. They should get off to a positive double, but we shall see what happens on Tuesday night. Right, okay, let's move on because we've got some big games Sunday for you to look at as well. Newcastle against Arsenal is Sunday. Crook and I are going. Are we going, Crook? Are we going? Are we going? Are we going?
Just about.
Are we going? Yeah. Just about.
I'm leaving now after this podcast.
Just checking. We're going. We're going to be there Sunday afternoon, 4:30, Newcastle against Arsenal. Game Day Live coming from St James's Park, 1:30 start on your radio and your app. Arsenal have conceded 2. They've scored 12 goals across 6 games. And I suppose if you look at it in that way, you go 2 goals a game. That's absolutely fine. That's standard. But 5 of those goals came against Leeds United. And they struggled to create chances against Port Vale in midweek. I was there at Vale Park. And despite the fact that they played a very strong team in that game, Scott, this game's not a usually high-scoring match anyway. And I just wonder if Arsenal's lack of goal return is starting to concern anyone, or is there anyone sort of thinking, actually, do you know what? They haven't really been able to create enough just yet.
I think it's going to be fascinating team selection. After the team selection against Manchester City and what's been said after that as well. I defend I like him. I like him a lot. I like what he's done at Arsenal. And I defend him with that Liverpool game, both in terms of team selection and substitutes at the time that he did them and the scoreline at that particular time. I don't feel I can defend him with Manchester City against a poor Manchester City side. And I say that, comparing them to how they've been in recent years. A Manchester City side that are just literally, just didn't do what Pep does. And that's a story in itself. But this is going to be a game that they quite simply have to win. And it's not going to be easy to do. Now, Newcastle don't score many goals either, so I can see just 1 goal winning this. But I think it's going to go back to type. I really do. I think it's going to make it difficult just because it's such a tough game. and he's going to have his finishers, as he says, on the bench. I think he's stubborn. You need to be stubborn, but sometimes a strength can be a weakness. And as I say, I've been with him all along and admired his work, but it can't just be enough to say, oh, they'll be up there at the end of the season. They have to be winning the Premier League title, or if not, losing by a point on the final day. And at this moment in time, they're not showing enough, either to Arsenal fans or to neutrals, that they actually want to go for the win. And Liverpool, with the way they're winning at the moment, not playing well, not in second or third gear, God, if they click, then the season could be done again by April.
Interestingly, because Arteta is aware of this narrative that is doing the rounds, he sort of came up with a bit of a defence, talking about the handbrake. He was saying that no team have dominated Manchester City the way we dominated Manchester City. I do think there is a little bit of a agenda here, in that people had decided that they were cautious before they saw the team selection. Once the team selection came out, it backed up the theory. The truth is, he also made game-changing substitutions at half-time. Now, you can say that was a little bit too late or whatever, but at the same time, there does appear to be this sort of pervading narrative of overriding caution. What did you think of his defence of his tactics against Manchester City? And what do you think he's going to do on Sunday?
Well, I don't think we're going to see much different on Sunday from what we usually get with Mikel Arteta. I think, like you, I'm not expecting a goal fest, because you look at Newcastle this season, they're still trying to find a solution to score goals without Alexander Isak. I think their last 3 away games in the Premier League have all ended in goalless draws. So defence at the moment is their strongest part of the team. They'll try and frustrate Arsenal. I would imagine it will be quite a defensive midfield again that Mikel Arteta selects, because he's going to be very respectful of Newcastle. My take on it on Sunday was that you can praise Arteta for making the changes that he did and being decisive at half-time, but you can also criticise him for actually picking the wrong team in the first place. And my issue with Arteta, and I've said this a few times over the last few years, I've said it when I've been on programmes with you, I think he deserves tremendous credit for making Arsenal relevant again, for transforming them to a side who were just about qualifying for the Europa League to one who've gone really close to winning the Premier League title in each of the last 2 or 3 seasons. But I think ultimately he'll be judged as the man who couldn't quite get Arsenal over the line. And maybe it's harsh, but somebody did suggest to me in the aftermath of that Man City game, this is someone who spent a lot of his playing career under David Moyes. He wasn't a serial winner, Arteta, as a player, and maybe that's rubbing off on him in the dugout as well.
I wonder what team he's going to pick, because he hasn't got Madueke this weekend. Ødegaard wasn't fit to play. Saka obviously got a kick in midweek against Port Vale. It was quite a nasty little one as well. He will be forced into changes, but I'm not sure that he can afford to start a midfield of Rice, Marino and Zubimendi and not come away with a victory in this game, Scott, because then the criticism really will start to ramp up.
Do you know what, Sam? We can talk left, right, and centre about what we think he should do. Ultimately, if you speak to managers who have been managers and experienced managers, and I do, it's about winning games. And what does that mean? How do you get to winning games? You either make one decision or you make the other. One thing you have to do, which to be fair to him, he does, you have to go with your own principles and your own convictions. But if he goes with that same midfield and they don't get the win, even if he can justify this is Newcastle away, and even though they don't score goals, with the fans, with their physicality and the athleticism that they have, it's such a difficult place to go, then that narrative is just going to keep on going. It's almost as if I just felt it's almost at the 2 games, Manchester City at home or Newcastle away. Newcastle away is the midfield where you pick those 3. It's not Manchester City at home. Go at them. They're vulnerable. And we saw that in the way that they played and the tactics. Yeah. So it's almost now, whatever he does, he has to win the game, because I'm with Crookie. And you talk about finishers come off the bench. I mean, Madueke was injured, don't forget. So he had to come off. So
absolutely.
That was an enforced one. And finishers, however you dress it up, you still want your best players on the pitch for as long as possible. So if you're on the bench, Yes, you can change a game. I mean, Erling Haaland could be an unbelievable finisher. Imagine him coming off the bench with 30 minutes to go when you're all tired and him bombing on in behind. But he starts every game if he's fit because he's one of the best players in the team. The best players need to be starting. But ultimately, yeah, going back to Arteta, if he doesn't win this one, and especially if they lose, I tell you what, the knives will be out.
Erling Haaland could be an unbelievable finisher in that sense. He is an unbelievable finisher in the other sense. Is Viktor Gyökeres, Crook?
Well, I don't think we can compare him to Erling Haaland yet. I felt a little bit sorry for him against Manchester City because obviously everyone will say, well, this is another big game where Gyökeres has not turned up, same as at Old Trafford, same as at Anfield. It plays into the narrative that I've used about him being a flat track bully, but ultimately didn't really get the opportunity to shine in that game because the service wasn't there. I'm not sure.
And that service has got to come from the midfield, right? So the lack of magic in that midfield, and that's no disrespect to Marino and to Rice and to Zubimendi, but the lack of sort of creativity and the spark and the little bit of cuteness, which Eze provides, for example, would give him that, would it?
Potentially, but I was just going to say, I'm not sure he's going to get much change out of Sven Botman and Dan Burn this weekend. I thought the pair of them, Burn in particular, were exceptional against Bournemouth last weekend. And he has had a habit of being marked out of games by big central defenders. Matthijs de Ligt did a job on him at Old Trafford. Canate did the same at Anfield. So I'm not sure this is the game where Gyökeres is going to turn people's opinions of those who maybe doubt his ability at the top level.
We've already decided that our Christmas party this year is going to be a Nick Voltemade fancy dress party, Scott, because we love his look so much. Is he going to start this game or is he going to be on the bench for Newcastle?
Yeah, I heard you saying about he's sort of from the 90s. I think Perry said from the 80s. I would have said 70s, personally. He looks like a 70s cop, doesn't he?
He is so cool. I love him.
In a Starsky and Hutch, almost like a third cop type of thing. He has to start. I mean, Newcastle are struggling to score goals. You've just spent the amount of money you've spent on him. He needs to get up to the pace of the game. I mean, what a game. And he's going to learn a lesson coming up against arguably the best central defensive partnership, not just in the Premier League, but in Europe. But he has to start. You have to start your best players. You have to start, if you put that amount of money in, give him a chance and a run of games. I'm not going to judge him on this particular game because Arsenal are so good defensively. But he has to start. And just on Gyökeres, you and I, when we were talking late last night, Sam.
Oh, yes, we did have a conversation about that, didn't we?
We did. People have to remember he's not fit. He kind of did a Visser and an Isak in Sporting where he wasn't training and he didn't want to sort of get involved in pre-season. So I see him making the runs, but I think he's half a yard short at the moment. I still think Arsenal need to realise they do have a number 9 in their ranks, and it's not necessarily play the ball up to him when you've got 2 centre-halves hanging off you and he hasn't kept the ball up. But it's about getting the ball wide, getting in behind and whipping it across. That's when you've got to get in the way that Igor Jesus did, last night for Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, there was one particular moment last night when he came off the bench, the ball went over the top. Max Dowman played a lovely ball and it just floated over his shoulder. Now, I'm thinking maybe if he's up to full speed, Gyökeres, he allows it to bounce and then hits it as it comes back up off the half volley. Or he hits it first time as it drops over his shoulder. It goes across the goalkeeper and flashes into the far corner. But what he did was he allowed it to bounce, then took a touch, then tried to go round the goalkeeper, by which point the defender is across to block the effort. And, that speed of thought, that quickness of movement needs to be right up there, especially if you're playing for Arsenal and you're leading the line. I want him to succeed, Viktor Gyökeres, as you know from the pre-season podcast. And I want Arsenal to succeed a little bit because I do like Mikel. And I know Crook doesn't like the fact that I like him, but I do like Mikel.
Did you call him before you called me last night as well?
He's on speed dial 1, Crookie.
This is still probably 3 weeks away, maybe even a month as well. That'd be important for Newcastle to get him back. But I get the feeling this is a kind of game that Joel Linton and Bruno and Dan Burn, they'll really fancy, won't they? I mean, because they don't like Arsenal and they like to ramp it up against them. There's been a bit of history between the two, a bit of needle between the two before. We've had some spicy moments. We think we'll probably get 1 or 2 more. Aston Villa chasing a first win of the season. They take on Fulham this weekend. And Monchi has left. What's happening?
Yeah, that was a big shock on Monday night. I don't think anybody saw that coming, given that he was almost handpicked by Unai Emery to come and help him transform Aston Villa. But I guess someone had to pay the price for poor recruitment. You look at Donyell Marlin, who came in January, hasn't really pulled up any trees. Amadou Onana is the record signing and struggles to stay fit. And there are other examples where players have been brought to Villa and not really worked out. I think Monchi personally was a bit frustrated that the PSR restrictions stopped him doing what he wanted to do this summer, namely signing Asensio on a permanent contract and maybe Marcus Rashford as well, although I think Rashford was always heading to Barcelona. It does raise question marks, I think, about the future of Unai Emery, particularly if Monchi pitches up back in Spain and with a high-profile job. Will he try and reunite the pair? But they have moved swiftly enough to replace him, so that might silence some of the noise. But it does play into the narrative that this has been a really turbulent start to the season for Aston Villa, and they're in desperate need for a win this weekend.
I think it's really interesting that you say someone had to pay the price for the poor recruitment. My answer to that is why? Why does someone have to pay the price for the poor recruitment? The truth is that this is a club that are hamstrung by financial restrictions that have been, imposed on them by the Premier League. And those financial restrictions have contributed to them having to shop in a very different market from which they were trying to last season and had been previously. So why does someone have to pay the price? I mean, surely he can only work with the tools that he has got. I mean, it doesn't really make sense to me that he's departed, Scott. I'm a bit baffled by it, to be honest.
I think he's walked. I think he's had enough. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I've got no insight or intel at all. But I think he's someone who, with everything that he's done in his career and seen to be as one of the best sporting directors out there, I think he's just thought, and fair play to him, I'm going to walk away from this. I know nothing here, but it doesn't make sense for the club to get rid of him, knowing that the restrictions that they are currently under, and everybody knows about it. So the only other option for me is that he's walked. Now, I don't believe Emery's going to be leaving Aston Villa anytime soon as such. He sort of laughed about it when he was asked in a press conference. There's not many bigger clubs, and despite the PSR problems, than Aston Villa around Europe. And if Monchi gets one of those big ones, there's a handful, no more than that, in terms of even budgetary, then maybe we'll start talking. But no, I think, you came across him, didn't you? I remember speaking to you after where he was, really offish to you, and he was offish to a lot of people. And I said, look, there's something going on behind the scenes quite clearly. And obviously it's come out and, he wasn't happy with the window. But he needs to almost give himself a kick up the backside now, because it starts from him. The standards start from him. We talk about the recruitment. What was it? 9 of the starting 11. Were there before he actually joined Aston Villa. So he needs to sort of just give himself a little bit of a shake and say, right, this squad with the individuals that we have should be finishing minimum top half. And what a great opportunity, because I've done it more than once, multiple times, going deep into the Europa League. And as we've seen with many teams, they can start off badly, but you can develop throughout the season. But they have to do it, and they have to do it soon.
I think the whole situation at Aston Villa actually is a bad look for the Premier League. I think if you achieve what they achieved over the course of the first part of Unai Emery's tenure at the football club, and then they run into this sort of trouble where people are getting frustrated because they can't operate the way they want to because of a lack of financial sort of flexibility, the limitations placed on them by UEFA and the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules. I actually think that is a bad look for the whole division, because what you're saying is that no matter what you achieve, there is only ever going to be a limit of where you can go, unless you are super patient and you do it over 10, 15 years. So you either have to, and some may argue that's what we want. We want people to build sustainably. We don't want someone to come in and blow up the whole thing and do what Chelsea and City have done and Blackburn have done previously. We want slow, sustained growth or whatever. But actually, I think I can imagine that if you're an owner who's put a lot of money into a football club, if you're a manager and a director of football that have come in for a specific project, when it gets to this situation and you're almost, you're almost sort of told, no, you stay there. I think that can be very frustrating, and actually I don't think it's great for the Premier League. Crook?
I was just going to say, I wonder if there's a bit of a motivation issue when it comes to the players, a hangover, if you like, from missing out on the Champions League. Obviously, I had the taste of that competition last season. And I also think there are certain individuals that maybe have been knocked by speculation. Emi Martinez obviously didn't play against Palace because I think he thought he was off to Manchester United. Didn't happen for him. United also made an inquiry for Ollie Watkins. We broke that on talkSPORT earlier in the summer, and he has looked at a long way short of top form. And even Morgan Rogers, who has a massive incentive in terms of trying to nail down not just a place on the plane for England next summer, but maybe a place in the starting 11. And I think his levels have dropped as well. I know there was a lot of interest in him from top Premier League clubs. So these are all issues that Unai Emery needs to solve from within the dressing room.
Also, I mean, I think it's sort of encapsulated by the fact that Buendia started last week, right? This is a guy who was sent on loan to Bayer Leverkusen last year, maybe to get fit, maybe because they didn't want him around, maybe because they had other people that they wanted to use. But now they're relying on him. And when you look at the team and you write out the 11 from last week, it looks like a team that's gone backwards from the second half of last season rather than a team that has gone forward. And that must be frustrating as well. Brentford against Manchester United, live on talkSPORT this Saturday lunchtime, 12:30. At the same time, Coventry Birmingham is on talkSPORT too. We're around the grounds with Adrian Durham, Troy Deeney, Leanne Sanderson and Mickey Gray from 2:30 on Saturday. We've got all the goals as they go in with Adrian. Premier League, EFL, Chelsea, Brighton, Crystal Palace, Liverpool, Manchester City against Burnley. Southampton, Middlesbrough's on 2 at the same time. And 8 o'clock, Tottenham against Wolverhampton Wanderers. Looking forward to that. Game Day Live on Sunday. Mickey Gray, Perry Groves and I, plus the Crookmeister, are going to bring you all the goals as they go in from around the WSL and the Premier League and the Championship and Scotland as well. So make sure you're with us with that. And then Everton West Ham is live on Monday night. Crookmeister, I'm looking forward to seeing you this weekend. We've got a little bit of a weekend together. No need for 7 phone calls in one day.
Mainly in the car, I think.
We got a 6-hour round trip to Newcastle to do together, which we're looking forward to. And Scotty, baby, we'll see you this weekend. I'm sure we'll see you at some point this weekend. We'll speak to you at some point. And we'll see you soon. Thank you very much for coming on the programme today. Premier League All Access available on the talkSPORT app, wherever you get your podcasts. And we're on YouTube as well, if you want to see just how long Crook's hair really is. We'll see you next Monday.